Of the Hudson Board of Education. It's a special meeting. Today is Thursday, October 26, 2006. We'll call the meeting to order, and one of the first items will be if we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I move we approve the agenda.
We have a motion by Ms. Crimmins. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bell. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion is approved. Next item is the board committee reports. We'll have a committee report first from Mr. Munich with the Facilities and Grounds Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, I would just say we did meet earlier this week. Essentially, the primary thing to report back to the board is that we did discuss and beginning to take a look at short-term solutions for secondary space. I think where we're at right now is in conjunction with our superintendent, we are developing a very lengthy list on options short-term, and kind of taking the philosophy that just like much what we did with the elementary solution, that no idea right now is a bad idea. We think it's imperative for us to develop the list, develop the options, and then begin to come back to the board and present those options and ideas to you. I think one thing that I would emphasize is that if the public has thoughts, ideas, comments that the Facilities Committee can hear, I would encourage them to call myself or maybe call you, Dan, or I think probably even better would be to call directly to our superintendent. I think based on where we are with our growth, I think the board recognizes, as does the Facilities Committee, that we are in need of looking at these short-term solutions and trying to expedite the process. So if you as chair have any thoughts, or Mary, if you have thoughts, but we are in process. As our last meeting, we have another meeting on the 31st, and we'll get back to the board. But meanwhile, let us know, let Mary know, both as board members and as the public, if you have thoughts, ideas, and comments.
I just want to express thank you to the board. I know that our first priority, obviously, is elementary space, and that need is very prominent. And looking at the high school and the situation we are in at this time, I really appreciate the board starting the wheels to move forward with secondary space, particularly a short-term solution. We have this year, we're 180 students over capacity at the high school. We didn't expect to be quite that far above capacity. And it's a wonderful situation that our high school is well known and well respected, and students and staff and families value the learning that occurs here. We, looking at that and looking at our senior class, knowing that there are 401 resident students in our senior class, it is the smallest of the 4 classes at the high school. So it's being replaced by larger classes. And we need to move forward with a short-term solution to help relieve our students and our staff, and to help provide quality learning experiences, or continue to provide quality learning experiences as we move forward. So looking towards next year, I feel really good that we're starting to make plans to implement a short-term solution.
Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Mr. Minnick. I agree, and I fully support the continued progress on the short-term secondary solution. I know you'll be looking at a lot of different options and reporting back to us in the future, so good luck with that process.
Yeah. One quick comment, Dan. I think that we will probably, it would be my guess if I were to make a projection here, that we may come back and it may not be just one solution. It may be a combination of thoughts and ideas that I think ultimately the Facilities Committee will bring back to the full board. So.
Okay, thank you. Board members have any comments, discussion regarding that item? Okay. That said, we'll move on to topics for action. Oh, excuse me, the Finance Committee meeting. Mr. Holland, as you notice, is not able to be with us this evening. Tim, Mr. Erickson, would you be able to just highlight some of what happened at that meeting?
I could do that.
Or Mr. Kaiser-Scott, I'm sorry.
Sure, no, that's fine.
Mark?
Tom had chatted earlier that he was going to be gone, so I offered to pinch hit for him. Finance Committee did meet on the 16th of this month, and a number of items that were on the agenda. First and foremost, of course, was the 06-07 budget and levy, which we'll be getting to later tonight. Numbers came in really pretty close to Mr. Erickson's projections. Actually, I guess slightly better. Our district valuation was up just a little bit, and as a result, the mill rate that we'll be talking about tonight will be just a little bit lower than we had discussed at the annual meeting, lowered from $7.23 to $7.15. So, but very close to our original projections. We also talked about financial statement, the format of some of our reports, and I know Tom had brought some that he had used, I guess, at the Y, and just kind of looking to see if we can, maybe present some of the financial data in a more readable, more understandable format, and we're going to continue to look at that and kind of bounce some ideas off there. In addition, we talked about perhaps putting out more frequent financial data. I know that Tim had mentioned maybe we'll be looking at quarterly reports, perhaps in the near future. So, and that's still progressing, as well as then following up with putting financial information on the website. The annual report is now on the website, I believe, and we'll again, evaluate by that and see how much more we may put on that website. I anticipate if we end up going to quarterly financial reports, that those will perhaps also be on the website. And we also talked about maybe getting some feedback from the public too regarding to what they want to see on the website without sort of overburdening our memory space on the website with a lot of financial data. So that's kind of a work in progress too. And then finally, we were asked to take a look at some of the fees for the rental of school district facilities. We looked at what we're currently charging now, and we have rates that are kind of based on different groups in the community, whether they be private groups, nonprofit, community groups, and I think we're going to examine those a little bit and perhaps maybe consolidate them and maybe clear it up a little bit. Some of them don't exactly necessarily make perfect sense in the fact that you could have a nonprofit group being in a different place than a community group, and we want to make sure we have some meeting, if not next time, perhaps very soon with Mr. Ofstedal to kind of get some feedback on what has been taking place and how that's been working with our current fee structure. So that's a wrap.
Thank you, Mark. Good report. We'll move
Mr.
on.
President,
Oh, I'm sorry.
just one comment. Yeah, I just fully support getting that stuff on the web, and I think we just start with what we think may be a good first start, and then get some public input on what they think about it. Looking at some public corporations out there, how they have their financial data, and some explanation around the financial data, I think would be great. And I do share the kind of simplifying some of the financial reporting. I know the state mandates a certain way we have the reporting, and it's confusing. It was confusing to me. It's still before I ran for school board, especially when you have like the special ed fund is it's the way it's reported. Sometimes can be confusing. So I think that'd be those are all good things. So
good. Thanks, Brian. That was one of the, I think, objectives when Tom had brought into some of the things that they do with the YMCA.
Yep.
And theirs is a much more simplified format. How much how much we can derive from that, because obviously we're a little more complex organization, but we are certainly looking at that. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members? Thank you again, Mark, for that report. We'll move on to topics for action. Tim Erickson is going to review the resolution authorizing issuance of the general obligation bonds through referendum. So, Tim, do you want to walk us through that, please?
Sure. The first resolution on page 1 of your booklet is the initial resolution to authorize the bonding of $12,040,000 to build and equip a new elementary school. The second resolution, after the first is approved, would be on page 3, and what that resolution provides for is a referendum on the election, a referendum election on the question of the initial resolution.
Okay. Board members, any comments, discussion with that? With that, I think we'll have Clerk Crimmins read the initial resolution as printed on page 1.
This is the initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $12,040,000. Be it resolved by the School Board of the District of Hudson, St. Croix County, Wisconsin, that there shall be issued pursuant to Chapter 67 Wisconsin statutes general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $12,040,000 for the purpose of paying the cost of constructing and equipping a new elementary school. Be it further resolved that the district clerk is hereby authorized and directed to publish a notice to electors in substantially the form attached hereto as Attachment 1 in the Star Observer within 10 days of the adoption of the foregoing resolution. Be it further resolved that pursuant to Section 67.05, paren 6A, paren A, 2A of the Wisconsin statutes, the district clerk is hereby directed to call a special election to be held on December 12, 2006, for the purpose of submitting the foregoing initial resolution to the electors for approval or rejection. The initial resolution shall not be effective unless adopted by a majority of the school district electors voting at that referendum.
Thank you, Clerk Crimmins. With that said, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the motion of this resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $12,040,000.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Kaiserschott. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Tracy Habish-Aline. Any discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote.
Kaiserschott, aye.
Minnick, aye.
Chernahoy, aye.
Crimmins, aye.
Habish-Aline, aye.
Bell, aye.
Motion is approved 6-0. Next item, we'll move on to the resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of an initial resolution authorizing issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $12,040,000. Tim?
This resolution, again, it provides for the election, a referendum election on the initial question bonding for $12,040,000 to equip and build an elementary school. It does have a number, I notice under Section 3, it does have a number of references to publishing type A, B, C, D, et cetera, which are attached to the resolution. Those will be published as instructed on those following pages.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I think at this point what I'll do is I'll have Clerk Crimmins read the resolution as stated on page 3 and 4. And then what I would like to do at that point is we do have a request to speak from the public on this topic. So I'd like to have that individual step forward as soon as we're done reading the resolution.
This is the resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of an initial resolution authorizing issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $12,040,000. Whereas the school board of the District of Hudson, St. Croix County, Wisconsin, the district, has duly adopted an initial resolution entitled Initial Resolution Authorizing General Obligation Bonds in an amount not to exceed $12,040,000, this to be called the initial resolution. Whereas the school board has determined to submit the initial resolution directly to the electors of the district for rejection or approval pursuant to Section 67.05, paren 6A, paren A, 2.A of the Wisconsin statutes, and whereas the initial resolution shall not be effective unless it is approved by a majority of the district electors voting at the referendum. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the school board of the district as follows. Section 1, referendum election date. A referendum election shall be held in the district on December 12, 2006, for the purpose of submitting to the qualified electors of the district the proposition of whether the initial resolution shall be approved. Section 2, polling places. District electors will vote in the referendum election at their regular polling places during the hours as specified in the Type D notice. Section 3, notice of referendum election. The Star Observer is the official newspaper of the district with publication on Thursday of each week. The district clerk or his or her designee is directed to give notice of the referendum election as follows. A, by publishing a Type A notice of referendum election in substantially the form attached hereto as Exhibit A in the Star Observer on November 9, 2006. B, by publishing a Type B notice in substantially the form attached hereto as Exhibit B, which includes a facsimile ballot and voting instructions to electors in the Star Observer on December 7, 2006. C, by publishing a Type C notice of referendum in substantially the form attached hereto as Exhibit C in the Star Observer on December 7, 2006. This notice should be printed as close as possible to the ballot portion of the Type B notice discussed above. D, by publishing a Type D notice in substantially the form attached hereto as Exhibit D, stating the hours the polls will be open and identifying the polling places in the Star Observer on December 7, 2006. E, by publishing a Type E notice in substantially the form attached hereto as Exhibit E, setting forth absentee voting procedures in the Star Observer on November 9, 2006. Section 4, absentee ballots. The municipal clerks of the municipalities within the district are hereby designated and appointed as the officials who shall receive applications for absentee ballots and initial the same when issued to qualified absentee voters. Section 5, report of results of referendum election. In accordance with Section 67.05, paren 3, paren G of the Wisconsin statutes, the referendum election shall be held and conducted, and the votes cast thereat counted and canvassed, as in other matters voted upon, and the results certified forthwith to the clerk of the district. The district clerk shall then report the result of the referendum election to the school board at its next regular or special meeting.
Thank you, Clerk Crimmins. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Wehrman forward, who had requested an opportunity to speak on this topic. If you could address the microphone and state your name and address, please. Thank you.
Rob Warren, 810 Antler Ridge. I guess, first of all, I'm pretty new to the community. I've only been here about a year and a half, and we've got 2 kids in their elementary and junior high age. And we're not in the public school system right now, but I thought, well, maybe when they get into high school, we might put them in the high school at that point. So I'm kind of trying to get involved with the school system in general to find out what's going on. I got the notice in the mail about the public input sessions, and I went to one of those, and I guess I was pretty surprised that this issue is not on the November ballot. You know, frankly, that just shocked me. How could we have something this important not be on the November ballot? And then I went to the meeting the next day, the school board meeting, and heard the discussion about, well, we could use April as a date, and then all the reasons why. And it struck me then, you know, this is something that's so important, so time critical, we can't wait to April. But somehow it wasn't so important that it couldn't make November 7th. So I don't understand that. So I'm hoping at the end here you can give me a good explanation of why it was not on the November 7th ballot. So that's really what I'm concerned about. Then kind of another point would be, I heard that, you know, and it's arguable, is the total cost per student about $10,000 per student, $11,000 per student, somewhere in the middle? I don't know if that's a fair price. I'm more used to private education, and I'm thinking, you know, elementary school total delivered cost somewhere around $3,000 to $4,000. So I'm not really sure why it's so high, but somebody could probably explain that to me. But here's where the concern comes from. If you assume that that's a fair price, and we're going to add this school, what's going to happen in the future? You know, and I'm in manufacturing, and if I went to one of my, and I do capital expansions all the time, and we have to forecast out many years what the cost of our products are going to be, what the sales are going to do, what the margins are going to be. And if we're going to add capacity, that all has to be justified. We have to have a net present value that makes sense. And I don't see that yet. I see a cost of a school and what the impact on our taxes for the school is, but I don't see a projection out into the future of, say, what that cost per student is going to do. And that seems a reasonable request, that your product is to deliver education at a price. And if you're at $10,000 a student today, what's it going to be 5 years from now? Do we have tax revenue coming in with the new families to offset that? Or is the cost per student going to go up faster than our tax revenues are going to come in? I just don't understand the math yet on how that works. So again, I'm hoping somebody can clarify that for me. And you've got my contact information, so if somebody wants to call me, go ahead. So here's what I'm thinking, is that at the last school board meeting, we had some students and some other people concerned about a high school. Well, that scares me, because I don't know what a high school costs. Is that $60 million? So if that's going to happen in the future, I want that put in the plan. I want to see a chart that shows the cost per student out 10 years. Where are the big investments going to be? Where are we adding staff? Where are we adding buildings? Where are we repairing roofs? So that I can see that the cost per student is staying reasonable. Because right now I'm kind of thinking it's not. It's always going to be going up faster than the growth of the economy. And if the cost of education goes faster than the economy, that will wreck the economy. And that would, you know, that we can't afford that either. That'll close businesses and drive businesses out. So, you know, until I see that, I can't buy in. So first of all, I've got to vote no because you're going for November 12th. I think that's wrong. And then until I see this whole projection out in the future, then I still have to kind of vote no. So hopefully you can provide me some of that information. That's it.
Thank you for your comments. Board members, any discussions? We do, Mr. Kaiserschott?
Yes, I guess I'd just like to make a couple responses to. Is it Mr. Wermer? Am I catching his name?
Mr.
Right?
Werman, I believe.
Werman?
Is that correct?
Werman? Okay, sorry. Okay. I guess maybe I'll just briefly give you my personal remark with regard to the election date. I guess in an ideal situation, if you could coincide the referendum with a general election date, I think we'd probably all be in favor of that. A timetable like this just simply didn't present itself. And I know you mentioned you were at the previous meeting when we were looking at various dates, and there was some consideration given to waiting till April. However, I think you have to balance that against the construction delay, and that would have prevented us opening up that building when we need it. So I think it's a balancing of interests. Certainly, preferably, you would have an election during the general election date. But our timetable didn't allow that. And so when a choice has to be made, I think in the interest of making sure we provide that first-class education for our kids in a timely manner when we need it, I think that really trumps when the election date is held. This is an important issue. People are going to be well aware of it. We're doing everything we can to inform the voters. And I do think that, democracy is a participation sport. People have to get out there and vote. It would be more convenient for them, perhaps, on a general election day, but that shouldn't prevent a informed and concerned citizen from going to their polls. It's really a very small bit of exercise, I think, for something that is so important for the community. Didn't mean to go on that long. Cost per student, $9,200. I know these figures always get distorted somehow. I saw a letter to the editor today expressing that cost as $11,000. It is, I've got here page 20 of our annual meeting booklet, and these are figures from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, and this was audited data as of April 7th of this year. If you look right in the middle of the page, you'll find the total educational cost per member. Hudson is highlighted there. It is $9,202. Yes, is that still probably more than a private school education? Depends on what private school you're talking about. Many times, I know I had private school education myself. I think one has to also consider that many private school students are not paying the full cost of their tuition. They are often subsidized, in my particular case, by the parish to which I belonged. So very important, I think, to compare apples to apples. In addition, Hudson School District does not we educate everybody, let me put it that way. We have students that come through our doors with special needs. We have to take the entire spectrum. We can't cherry pick our students. And though I might add that while those students that have special needs cost obviously proportionally more, it is imperative that we give them the best education that we can. That we owe them that, and they're entitled to that, just as much as any other student, even though the costs are considerably more. Private schools seldom have to bear that kind of burden. That really has to be kept in mind. And lastly, with regard to your desire to have future costs projected, I think you were looking at something that we can extrapolate out, cost per member, etc. We don't make uniform products here. We're not making widgets. When we try to extrapolate, I think, what works in private industry to the business of public education, it just doesn't work. In addition, a private corporation obtains financing at a particular rate, whether they go through shareholders or achieve financing in some other manner. We don't do that. We get some of our money from local taxpayers. We're dependent on a very flexible and ever-changing system of financing from Madison that changes from year to year. We simply can't provide that. I can't imagine a scenario where that could ever be done, where we could tell you 10 years from now what it's going to cost to educate our students. We hope for some consistency from year to year. And I think what you're looking for, you're making an unrealistic comparison between us and private industry. So, for what that's worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiserschat. And as board president, what I'd like to do is, since we're on topics for action, if someone has a specific comment or question as it relates to, the timing of the referendum, in response to that comment, I'm open to that. But we do have an opportunity later in the agenda to come back to more of an open-ended discussion. As it relates to the timing of this referendum, I was just in Madison recently, and one of the headlines down there in the newspaper was relating to Madison's school district referendum. As it was a question mark, what referendum? And the point is that it was getting lost amongst all the other things that are going to be in the November ballot. And as long as I've been on this board, we've always had referendums on dates other than the general election, simply because, at least from my standpoint, it brings greater attention to the issue if we hold it separate from a general election. And me personally, and I'm somewhat biased, I feel that school district issues and matters that go before the public are extremely important, and consequently I feel and continue to feel that these types of issues need to be held on a separate time where they don't get mixed up and confused with other items that might be on a general election ballot. That said, any other board comments on that topic?
I just have one comment about the timing is a no vote because it's based off, I think we should just vote based off what's the best for our children. And we don't have any seats left in elementary school. And a no vote means basically that we're in a non-optimal solution for years to come. And a yes or no vote really should go to the what's best for our children for their education.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, please.
Ms. Crimmins.
I just want to comment on the timing of the referendum, and I do know that given all of the things that were scheduled to happen before we could make the final decisions about whether or not to even go to referendum, and then what we would bring to referendum, I do know that this board and the administration worked very diligently to get that all calendared, and I think that sometimes maybe the public doesn't necessarily have a window into how complex it is with all of the people who are at this table, their schedules, the schedules that are of the organizations and the buildings that we wanted to go to and hold information meetings, all of the things that have to be calendared in order for for us to have come to this place. Wasn't just a matter of looking at the dates and saying we can do all this in this amount of time. There was a lot of complexity in terms of getting all of that arranged, and I know that it's and from my perspective unfortunate that we were not able to get this on the November ballot. But at the same time, I feel that it is important enough that we took the time to do right what we needed to do in order to communicate this. And I feel really good about a December 12th referendum on this. And I just wanted to say that I would be very sad if we lived in a community where people voted no because they didn't like the date of the referendum. I think that really would be a community in which we weren't putting our kids first. We were putting our convenience first, and I think that we have a responsibility, as board member said, that we should be thinking about what's best for our kids. So I support the December 12th date.
Superintendent Bowen-Niegebrock.
I'd just like to add a little timeline to Ms. Crimmins' comments. This board had 3 new members who were elected in April, and their first board meeting was in May. That is almost half of our board changed at that time. Obviously, this was a very big decision, and we needed to take time. So the first time that could even be addressed with this board was in May. Working through the summer, as Ms. Crimmins pointed out, it was important for us to get community feedback. Community feedback during the summer is a very difficult thing for people to be available and to be able to access those meetings. And it was very deliberate that we didn't do it in the summer. First of all, we needed to work through the decisions, but secondly, we wanted people to be available and be able to come to the meetings. So those meetings started in September and they ran through the beginning of October, up to the board's meeting in October. To get a referendum on the November 7th election, we needed to be 45 days ahead of that date to actually do what we're doing tonight, these 2 resolutions. That would mean that in September, we would need to actually act on these resolutions. That would almost eliminate any kind of community input we could have had unless we would have tried to figure out how to do that during the summer and make decisions at the same time.
Mr. Minnick.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chair. The last meeting I made the comment that, danged if we do and danged if we don't. And very clearly, I would rather be sitting here tonight saying or having comment from the public questioning the date rather than sitting here being critiqued or criticized that we didn't go out to the public, we didn't solicit public input and public comment. I would weigh heavily on the process that we just used because we went out and engaged, I don't know how many meetings and presentations we had to be well in excess of 20, 25 presentations, solicited input, and I think as public elected officials, anytime that we can go out and garner input from the public, we have to do that, and that's exactly what we did, and unfortunately we lost time, but to get that public input is invaluable, and I think it was the right thing, and unfortunately we lost time, and that puts us in the situation we're in.
Sure. Thank you. Any other board comments? We'll move on then. Clerk Crimmins read the resolution. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution as stated.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Kaisersock, second by Ms. Crimmins. Any further discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote.
Kaisersock, aye.
Minnick, aye.
Chernahoy, aye.
Crimmins, aye.
Habish, Charlene, aye.
Bell, aye.
Motion is approved 6-0. Superintendent.
Mr. President, I just would like to make a comment. We've talked, obviously, Ms. Crimmins read through these very complicated resolutions and took us through that. The numbers, the cost to our owners, $12 million, over $12 million. Just want to point out that the board has designated $3.5 million from the fund balance to support the construction of a new school. And also, those numbers are big numbers, but when we look at it in relationship to our owners, I think that's an important comment that we should make. And so for a person who owns a $300,000 house, or that's the value of that house, which is the average value in our school district, it costs $78 a year. It's estimated at $78 a year for that homeowner, an increase in their property taxes. And I think that's very important that we just highlight that with this decision that the board has made.
Thank you, and that's a very good point. We'll move on to topics for action. Item C, appoint deputy clerk for the December 12, 2006 referendum. Superintendent Mary.
I'd like to recommend that Tim Erickson serve as the deputy clerk for the coming election in December 12th.
I'll put that in the form of a motion and so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Minnick.
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Crimmins. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is approved 6-0. The last and final topic for action this evening is the approval of the 2006-07 budget and the certification of the 2006-07 levy. Mr. Erickson.
Thank you. Turn to page 18 in your agenda packet. And we're looking at a familiar document that we've looked at over the past few months here, and it is the mill rate calculation for the 06-07 levy. If you go down to the bottom of that first section where it's entitled 2006-2007, you'll see the district valuation, and now that number has been certified by the state. The final numbers have come out, and as Treasurer Kaiserschott had mentioned, those are final numbers on the valuation of the district at $3,362,000,000. So that's up slightly from where our estimate was back in September. You'll also notice as you move across the right-hand side about the middle of the column where it says total levy, our total levy will be certified tonight, which will be $24,037,800. That represents a 1.17% increase over last year's levy. If you look at the 04-05 levy, which is $24,345,000, that represents about a $236,000 decrease over the 2004-2005 levy. Moving across to the right under the mill rate, you'll see the mill rate is actually a little lower than what we had projected. It's actually at $7.15 versus the $7.23 that we had been estimating previous. So that brings us to a percentage change in mill rate, and that percentage change is down to almost 8%, at 7.99%, which is the lowest mill rate in 23 years, and that's going back as far as I could dig up information for, back to the 84-85 year. So anyway, I think that's some very good news. You'll see down at the very bottom section, it gives evaluation by taxing district, and I won't go through that unless there are questions. Turning to page 19. Again, you've all seen this document before, and I'm just going to draw your attention to the right-hand column, far right-hand column, about at line 11. You'll see that our aid amount is $22,677,000. That's up slightly when we looked at where our September or official September count for students came in. They were up higher than we had projected, so that brought in additional aid to the district. If you look at the line 13, which is the allowable limited revenue, that is the amount that we could levy for the general fund, which is $23,336,000. If you look at the amount that is actually levied, which is line 14, it's $20,399,000. And that is about $2.9 million under what the district could levy as far as the maximum levy is concerned. So again, I think that's very good news. So that's all I have for page 19. If we go to page 20, 20 goes through the calculations of how we arrive at our student aid for the general fund. It's $22,677,000, and I won't go through all the formula calculations there. If you go to page 21, that gives a summary of the revenues and expenditures by fund, and the changes to that from when we last looked at our September report would be under Fund 39, which is 39 revenue, which is the referendum approved debt service fund, and that's a fund that represents voter approved levies, building bonds. And what's changed there is we have added about $498,000 of revenue to that fund, and what that's for is the approved pay down of the Wisconsin Retirement System unfunded liability, which was approved to come out of fund balance. And it actually comes out of general fund balance, and I'll get to that in the bottom part of our expenditures. Other than that, there are no other changes to that first section, which are revenues by fund. Under expenditures by fund, if you look at Fund 10, which is the general fund, $44,861,000. That is an increase of approximately $498,000 over our previous report. And again, that's a mechanism that we use to take that $498,000 additional Wisconsin Retirement System payment of debt out of our reserve. We also have to account for that $498,000 expenditure out of the debt service fund. What happens is there's a transfer that happens from the general down into debt service. And again, the increase under Fund 39, the increase is about $498,000 more than what we had back on our September report. And that's just accounting for that payment of debt. So really a wash. The only other change was under Fund 21, which is Special Revenue Trust Fund, which represents gifts and grants to the district. That was decreased by $7,500 due to an adjustment and a timing on a grant that was received to the district. So those are the changes on page 21. And page 22 through 24 are the same as what was printed in the annual report. They do incorporate the changes that were made when we look at the fund summaries. And again, it's just in a different format. It's a format by function or program, if you will. But the numbers there match up with the numbers that are on the front page. Also gives fund balance information.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions from board members regarding Tim's report and a review of the updated financials? Just, I guess, brief observations on my part. And Tim, you alluded to it in terms of the mill rate. And I'm just sort of looking back over the course of several years. It looks like since 93, 94, where the mill rate was in excess of 18 points, we've consistently gone down, except there was one year in the 01-02 period, but we've consistently been going downward to the point, as you pointed out, we're at 7.15, which is less than half of where we were at the high point. So that certainly is encouraging to see.
Yeah, I would just add one bit of information as we were talking about per student costs in the state. We ranked 373rd out of 426 districts in our spending per pupil, and that was again, that was data 2004-2005 data, which put us in the bottom 15% of districts statewide.
Tim, I'm sorry, just a quick one as it relates to the DPI information. Can you tell, for the benefit of the public, briefly how they can access that information, the DPI website? Do you know what that address is?
I don't have the, let's see if the website, we do have the website address, and that is going to be http://wi.wi.gov/SFS/CMPCST05.XLS. And if somebody wants to come up and contact me after the meeting, I can certainly give that to them in writing.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Crimmins.
Well, first let me say that if you just Google Wisconsin Department of Instruction, you'll get their site, and it's pretty easy to follow. Things are clearly labeled, school district data and that kind of thing. So even if you have a hard time getting through all the slashes and backslashes, at least just Google Wisconsin Department of Instruction, and I'm sure that you'll find what you're looking for there. But what I wanted to ask, Tim, was would you please repeat that number? We were ranked 373rd out of 400 and how many districts?
Out of 426.
Out of 426 districts. And that was on our cost per student
That was a cost per student for 0405.
for the 0405 school year.
Correct.
And that put us in the lower 15%
That's
of
right.
districts
Yeah,
in Wisconsin.
that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Mary.
Just trying to be accurate here, it's in the bottom 12%.
Wow.
Do I hear 14%?
No, 10. Do we hear 10?
Okay, well, any other discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, just real quick.
Mr. Minnick?
Yeah, just a quick comment.
Are you, is it 13%?
No, the numbers are wonderful, and I know our academic achievement is in the top 10% of the state. Our cost per student, bottom 12, 13, 14%. And I think that's wonderful, and I've always said that we do a wonderful, wonderful job delivering a quality product to our taxpayers. But I would remind the board that we are levying approximately $3 million under what we could be levying. And there's good scenarios, bad scenarios. And we talked about ranking, 373rd out of 426 districts on our cost per student, audited as of 2004-2005 school year. And Tim, I don't expect you to answer it, but I think we are one of the few districts also in the state of Wisconsin that does not levy at their full limit. So I just point that out, and I will support the levy this year, but I would remind my fellow board members that we are levying $3 million under what we could be levying.
Thank you. Any other comment? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the 2006-07 final budget and certification of the 06-07 levy.
Mr. President, I'll make that motion to approve a levy of $24,037,800 and the budget as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Kaiserschott. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Can you read that number one more time?
The levy number would be $24,037,800.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote.
Kaiserschott, aye.
Minnick, aye.
Chernahoy, aye.
Crimmins, aye.
Habish-Charlene, aye.
Bell, aye.
Motion is approved 6-0. That concludes the topics for action. We'll next move on to citizens' request to speak to the board, and we do have a couple requests. We'll start with Mr. Mishlinsky, followed by Mr. Hermson, and I'd appreciate if you could limit your comments to around 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, Robert McClensky, 1301 Freer Street in Hudson. Just a quick question. Mr. Minnick gave his report on the Facilities Committee meeting that you had last week, and I've looked at the agenda that you've got for your next meeting. And it's very clear that you are just focusing exclusively on short-term options for secondary school overcrowding. And as I recall, when this Facilities Committee looked at the elementary problems for overcrowding, you looked at both short-term and long-term options at the same time. Now, I would think that with respect to secondary needs, that this board would be interested in hearing from the Facilities Committee and to find out both what they feel about short-term and long-term options. And it only makes sense to do it this way. You need to be able to see what your planning or your thoughts are for the next 5, 10, 15 years, because that's going to have a direct impact on what you decide to do in the next year or two. I mean, your long-term and your short-term are linked together. You can't be or shouldn't be talking about just the short-term without even thinking about what you're going to be doing long-term. In my mind, that's just short-sighted planning. You could box yourself in with making decisions on the next year or two without even giving a thought to what you're going to be doing long-term. So I guess I'm just curious why the board, the Facilities Committee, the superintendent would just instruct or expect the Facilities Committee to focus on short-term options in a vacuum and not even start or discuss the issue of long-term secondary solutions? Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Steve, do you want to come forward and then we can respond? Thank you.
Steve Hermson, 813 Harborview Road. The only question I got, and it's probably really more pointed towards Tim and a few of the board members in the Finance Committee. Do you guys know exactly when the books closed for the 05-06 year, as far as the board packets go for expense reports, versus when did they start on the spending for this budget that you're just approving right now? I have no way of knowing if you're following this. Where's the cutoff? So that was my only question, if board members knew. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Well, let's open it up to the board here. If anyone wishes to respond to these comments from the questions from the public.
Mr. Chair, I'll address Mr. Michlinski's comments. Two comments, Bob. One is, if I'm correctly remembering, your first comment or question was, are we looking at short-term or long-term, or is that what we had discussed at the most recent Facilities Committee? It definitely is short-term. Secondly, I share your concerns in terms of how to identify what is short-term, and then how does that impact any type of a long-term solution for secondary space. I think it's fair to say that we have some immediate needs for space at the high school, and I would put that in the category of short-term. And we'll try and address whatever those options are that we can implement on a fairly immediate basis. Long-term, in terms of capacity, I'm going to say that would relate to some type of facility. And for this community to go out and engage in the process of identifying a facility for long-term secondary solutions, personal opinion as one board member, I don't think we're there. I think we need to do much comparable for secondary as to what we just did for elementary. We went out and engaged the public. We engaged professional firms to look at costs. So I think, Bob, I'd love to sit here and say that we're immediately going to be in a position to implement a long-term secondary solution. The reality is that's not the case. But I hope that we can come up with some viable short-term solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Minnick. Any other board comments, response? Mr. Erickson?
Sure. I'll make some assumptions regarding Mr. Hermson's question, and I assume he's referring to the board packet expenditures and cash receipts. And how that aligns up with our financial statements. We do close, our year end is June 30th. However, when you're looking at the board packet and the expenditures and receipts that are reported in that board packet, they're on a cash basis. And what that means is they're recognized in the month that they're paid or received. How we report on our financial statements, how we're required to report on our financial statements, is on a modified accrual basis, which the two are not the same. And so to give an example of that, I can think of an aid payment that we might receive. We'll receive an aid payment actually in July, which will be in the next fiscal year. It'll be in the 07-08 fiscal year, but it actually is for the 06-07 year. So what will happen is that payment will be reported to the board in July when it's received. However, when we report our financial statements, that will be shown as a receivable and will be reported as revenue in the current year, in the 06-07 year. It gets a little bit confusing, but there are several examples of that type of thing. They are timing issues based on the different types of reporting. That would be my answer, and hopefully that's what the question was and what he was looking for.
Okay, thank you. And just an additional comment and follow-up. As Steve knows, Tim's office is always open for, me visiting further and digging a little deeper into that question. Certainly we want to try to satisfy any of those questions as it relates to the budget or financials or otherwise. Superintendent?
I would just like to go back to Mr. Werman's question about the cost per member, because I think it's such a critical thing and misunderstood by a number of people in our community. And it's a very difficult formula, or complicated, difficult isn't the right word, complicated formula that the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction uses to be able to compare data from 426 districts in the state. This is not the definition that the Hudson district uses. This is a definition and formula created by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. And their data that we just talked about, because I want to be really clear about that, we cannot just come up with any number. As a district, we have to get the accurate information about numbers. And the cost per member that Mr. Kaiserschott spoke about was from 2004-2005. It does take the DPI quite a couple years to get the current data out, but I know this board's worked very hard on our budget and levy, and even that, though that is increased for this year, it would still be probably in the same relationship it is to the other districts in the state. There was a comment about the comparison of our cost per member compared to private schools, and that our cost is very high in relationship. I wonder if we really took apples to apples, if that would be the case, because our cost per member is K-12. Actually, it's early childhood through 12. And if we compared the same things at private education, you can't just compare the cost a parent may pay as their tuition cost at private schools. There is fundraising that goes on. There is sometimes churches or other organizations who are also contributing, dioceses and so forth, to support that cost per member. And many of the schools, if we looked in our community, we have a K-8 school and we have a K-5 school. Their cost per member cannot be compared to a EC-12 school, district such as ours, that has a comprehensive high school. The cost of a comprehensive high school that serves our students is quite significantly different than a cost of educating elementary children in an elementary school. And so I think those are things that we certainly need to point out, as well as when you look at the state average and our cost per member in relationship to the state average, there's that number where we rank, but we are also $1,400 less than the state average for the cost per member. We use the formula that the Department of Public Instruction uses for the 426 districts in the state of Wisconsin. That is an outside source. Again, it's not the Hudson School District's number, it's something we've made up. We're using the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction's number. And you can go to their website and you can see what's included in that number and what isn't. The costs that aren't included are costs that are not supported by our taxpayers. And so those are costs borne by the users of that program. So, for example, food service is not included in that cost per member because the students pay for that as they use it or not use it. If they bring their lunch, they don't use that. Community service is not included in that cost because that's paid for by the users. So you can't just take our budget and divide it by the number of students and come up with a cost per member. That's not how this works in the system. And I just would encourage people to, as President Chernow just talked about, make an appointment to talk to Tim Erickson to find out more, or to go to the Department of Public Instruction's website and look at the comparison data there, because it's apples to apples.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay. We'll move on to, I believe, the final item on the agenda this evening, which is the board forum. And I had asked Mary to include in the board materials the Milwaukee County decision, and that's in your packet of materials. And if you recall, board members, this relates to a legal complaint brought by a couple members of the school district, basically raising question and potential open meetings violation of school board members attending the Wisconsin Association of School Boards convention back in January. We as a school board certainly took this complaint very seriously, consulted with our attorney as well as consulting with the WASB attorney, Mr. Hinsman. We provided evidence in support of our attendance at that meeting, and as you can read in reviewing that, I think some of the salient points that came out of that ruling, which was, by the way, favorable to the school district. They did not find us in violation of the open meetings law. But I think a couple things I would just like to point out, and maybe other board members have other things that they glean from this, is that, this certainly had the potential of having a large impact upon governmental and school district entities in the state of Wisconsin. So it did gather quite a bit of interest in this state in terms of the outcome of this ruling. So we certainly were pleased, and I think a number of school districts across the state of Wisconsin were pleased with this ruling simply because the state's school board convention draws quite a number of individuals and board members to attend that conference. And I think one of the things I'd like to just read from this ruling and from the WSB attorney, Mr. Hinsman, where they make reference to the purpose of that convention. And he stated, "This convention serves as the best opportunity for school board members to acquire knowledge in order to better discharge their duties as a school board member." Mr. Hinsman stated that this is in the best interest of the public for school board members to attend this annual conference. I'd also like to point out that our superintendent also was in contact with Mr. Hinsman prior to the school board, our school district school board members going to that convention to just find out if he had any concerns with a majority of the school board attending that conference, and he certainly dispelled any concerns that we might have. So I think we did our due diligence. We were taken to task on this. I think we provided the information, the evidence that Milwaukee County was looking for. I think they were pleased with all of the information that we provided, and their recommendation, although this ruling has the potential of being taken to the Attorney General's Office of Wisconsin, but the recommendation from the Milwaukee Corporate Council was that he did not believe that this should go any further than that jurisdiction. So that said, do board members have any further comments, questions?
I have a comment about that. I think that Mr. Kurt and Mr. Kurt Weiss and Mr. Marion Shaw, who brought this complaint against the school district, I think need to understand that board members in this district, as well as districts across the state, should be encouraged, not discouraged, from being involved in what's going on at the state level, in education, in learning what other districts are doing, in looking for best practices and ways that they can better understand the kinds of things that school board members do and when it's being done well and where it's being done well versus where it's not. And I think that part of a continuous improvement paradigm for our district, which I really believe that we need to be in always, a continuous improvement paradigm that says that we always want to be looking to be better, to be more diligent, to produce a higher result for our students, to give them more and better training and better preparation to be in the world and to be good citizens and to be effective people in whatever format they choose to be as adults in our society. And I think to discourage that and to discourage the community from appreciating the willingness of board members who take vacation time from their jobs and personal time away from their families to pursue this kind of preparation to be good school board members is, I think it's just sad. I think that this kind of discouragement isn't necessary. Encouragement for people to do more than what is required of them is necessary in our society. And so I just wanted to say that I think that this was frivolous, and I think they knew it. But that's my personal opinion.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Minnick and second by Mr. Mell. No discussion. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.